Ah, my 3 most loyal subjects. Rand, kiss my hand. Lee, kiss my knee. Where are you going, Mick?
We've made it all the way to the final court card in the tarot, and let me tell you, it's another humdinger. The King of Pentacles is the embodiment of earthly success, and I think we can see that by the way he's looking so satisfied, sitting in his garden surrounded by flowers and nature. He almost seems to merge into them, in a similar way to how the dress on the Queen of Cups merges with the water. He puts me in mind a little bit of the Green Man legend in English folklore. He's usually shown covered in leaves, and he's said to represent the cycles of life, death and rebirth, so not a million miles away from the earthly pentacles. A.E.WAITE had a lot to say about this one, which was unusual because in the key to the tarot he puts most of his energies into the major arcana and barely talks about the minors. He says the figure calls for no special description. Well, he obviously does, because Waite's given him a massive one compared to everybody else. The face is rather dark, suggesting also courage but somewhat lethargic in tendency. The bull's head should be noted as a recurrent symbol on the throne. So I think the lethargic part relates to how he's the highest authority in the element of earth, which is a passive element. If we compare him to the King of Wands, that one looks like he's about to jump up and run the 100 meters, but the King of Pentacles is happy just chilling out in his long gown with grapes all over it. He mentions the bull's head there, and I think this is a reference to Taurus. Now Taurus isn't the zodiac sign for this card, but it is the fixed sign of Earth, so I think that's why it crops up all over the throne. He goes on to talk about the pentacle itself and how he came to include it in the Waite-Smith deck. He says the sign of this suit is represented throughout as engraved or blazoned with the pentagram, typifying the correspondence of the 4 elements in human nature, and that by which they may be governed. In many old tarot packs this stood for currency, coin, money, deniers. Waite was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they took the elements very seriously. They actually made up the first 4 grades of initiation. I think it was for this reason that he didn't want to use coins as the symbol of the suit, because he saw the element of earth as encompassing the whole physical experience, and not just questions of money. Now this card is generally considered to be the final card of the tarot. When you buy a new deck, it's usually at the end. I've decided to do the 10 of Pentacles last because to me that's the most satisfying conclusion, but most people think of this as the final card. Now the order of the suits is dictated by the 4 Kabbalistic worlds. That's why we start with the Wands, because they live in the world of Absolute at the top. Next we've got the Cups in the world of Briar, followed by the Swords in Yetzirah, and finally Pentacles in the physical world of Ossiar. I think it's fair to say that the King of Pentacles is about as material as it gets. He's literally part of the scenery. Rachel Pollack says the mundaneness of Pentacles goes very well with the social responsibility of the king, who presents to us the very image of the successful business or professional man. So the success element is obviously very important. In this suit we've seen all kinds of different depictions of working and achieving mastery, but I think the king goes beyond that. I see him as someone who's achieved everything he wanted to achieve materially, and now he's just relaxing and enjoying it. His life is his own and he can do whatever he wants. Sounds good to me. Pollack goes on to say the casual way he sits on his throne, the fond way he looks at his pentacle, here the symbol of his capabilities and achievements, show him satisfied with life. The Thoth card goes heavy on the agricultural aspect of the element. Now once again I'm going to point out the different naming conventions between the Thoth and the Waite-Smith decks. In this case we've got a knight instead of a king, because CROWLEY considered the knight to be the highest authority. And he obviously wanted to annoy tarot YouTubers like me, who are just innocently trying to make sense of it all. He says this warrior is short and sturdy in type. He's clothed in great solidity of plate armour, but his helmet, which is crested with the head of a stag, is thrown back, for at the moment his function is entirely confined to the production of food. So apparently that thing on his head represents a stag, but for ages I thought it was a piece of coral. Anyway, food is definitely the theme for this card, together with the serious issue of horse depression. I don't think I've ever seen a horse look more fed up. That's got to be the longest face ever painted. CROWLEY goes on to say he rides through the fertile land, even the distant hills are cultivated fields. Lomas talks about how this particular knight differs from the others in the sense that he's more concerned with ploughing fields than going into battle. He says his flail dangles near the grasses, suggesting the thrashing of wheat rather than the thrashing of heads, and his shield is a disc that could double as a dish that could hold enough food to feed a village.
The Sforza and Marseille cards have got a pair of kings who both prefer the more awkward seated position. Does anyone else think the Sforza court cards look a bit like Barbie dolls? The Solarbuska card shows us a king with a mullet that would put Michael Bolton to shame. On the card is written the name Filippo, referring to King Philip of Macedon. We also see the word Pax written on the flag, which is the Latin word for peace. We finally experienced this new aspect, perhaps only as an alleviation. The Universe 4, morally speaking, closes in on the sphere of the globe presented by 6. The production of the aspect furthest opposite will circulate.
Well, there you go. Atalia puts in the last piece of the puzzle, and finally it all makes perfect sense.
The Hermetic title for the King and Knight of Pentacles is Lord of the Wide and Fertile Land.
The fertile land is obviously another reference to the earth element, with the rolling fields on the Thoth card and the flowery garden on the Waite Smith card. In either case, fecundity seems to be the order of the day. The other titles for the card are King of the Spirits of the Earth and King of the Gnomes, which is basically the same thing because gnomes are the spirits of the earth. Apparently gnomes are banned from the Chelsea Royal Flower Show. I'm not sure if that's because they're too mischievous, but apparently they've also got a lifespan of 400 years, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Doctor, I've got a bad back.
It's because you're old.
I want a second opinion.
Alright, you're ugly as well.
The King of Pentacles corresponds to the zodiac signs Leo and Virgo.
According to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, all the kings in the tarot are associated with fire, while the suit of Pentacles corresponds to earth. That means the King of Pentacles is fire of earth, and that's why we get the 2 zodiac signs. In this case, we're running from 20 degrees Leo to 20 degrees Virgo, which again makes the earth sign the dominant one, but with some of that royal fire thrown in for good measure. Leo is a natural leader with drive and ambition, so that fits well with the idea of material success that we see in the card. Virgo brings solid dependability and groundedness, so when we put the 2 together, we get a pretty good description of this king. King of Pentacles notable people include King Christian III of Denmark, King George I of England, and American boxing promoter Don King.
The King of Pentacles resides in the world of Asiyar and sits at the second Sephira of Hokmar, together with the 2 of Pentacles.
So we're all the way back up to Hokmar near the top of the tree, where all the kings live together with the 2s. This brings us to the final part of Lon Milo DeKet's royal fairy tale. He says our fairy tale king is the Yud in Yud-He Vav-He and lives in the second Sephira, Hokmar. His head, however, like the pointy little tip of the Hebrew letter Yud, really pokes up into Keter. But as long as the king identifies himself as king, he's unaware of the more exalted identity and has convinced himself that he lives in Hokmar. So because of the position of the king at Hokmar in the supernal triangle, he's right at the threshold of Keter, which translates to crown, so you can see how it all fits together. I'm trying to learn the Hebrew alphabet at the moment. Now, I'm by no means an expert, but I've read that the tip of the letter Yud, sometimes called the tag, is said to point towards God, while the lower line points towards Earth. The climax of the story is the realization that we're all part of the universal mind, an idea that traces back thousands of years to the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras, which I've probably pronounced wrong. When I made the video for the Ace of Pentacles, I read out a quote from Professor Brian Cox, where he said, "We are the cosmos made conscious. Life is the means by which the universe understands itself." It's one of those rare cases where spirituality, philosophy, and science are all in agreement. The idea that we're different expressions of a universal mind that's experiencing itself through us. Lon Milo DeKet goes on to say, ultimately, all the characters in our fairy tale are already living in the first Sephira Keter, the ace of each suit. Of course, they will only realize this in the timeless moment of ecstasy when they and all the units of consciousness in the cosmos finally wake up and realize we are one big consciousness.
The King of Pentacles herb is alfalfa. In Arabic, the name alfalfa means the father of all foods.
Back then, people used to hunt for food. I could never hunt for food. Why not? I don't even know where sandwiches live.
But what does it all mean?
The King of Pentacles is a card of achievement, generosity and security. Waite says valour, realising intelligence, business and normal intellectual aptitude, sometimes mathematical gifts and attainments of this kind, success in these paths. So the part about being successful in business is an important aspect. All the kings are related to being a sort of boss character, but when we apply that to the element of earth, we're seeing it manifested in material concerns. The nature aspect is a big part of it too. The garden on the card looks like it's almost overgrown, but he's obviously fine with that. He seems to be fully accepting of nature to the point where he's almost become a part of it. Quite often when people are driven to succeed, they can tend to get frustrated and impatient. That whole lust of result thing that I've talked about in other videos. The King of Pentacles is the perfect antidote to that kind of thinking. He's calm, relaxed and completely open to the world and the magic within it. Generosity is another aspect. He gives from a place of abundance, a little bit like the figure on the Six of Pentacles, but taken to a whole new level. In many ways he reminds me of the Ghost of Christmas Present from Charles Dickens. Kindness and goodwill to all, especially the poor. I've always seen this one as being the most benevolent king in the tarot, even more so than the King of Cups. As a figure of authority, he's definitely the person you want to see in charge. When he appears in a reading, he can symbolise ourselves and our own desire to succeed, and he looks after people materially. He's also a devoted partner and parent, because he loves the people around him and wants to see them succeed too. Rachel Pollack says he's generous, even courageous, though not especially given to adventure. Now his success has justified his life, allowing him to relax and enjoy it. On a side note, in 78 Degrees of Wisdom, Rachel Pollack makes an interesting point about the King of Pentacles being connected to the Fool. This is in the sense that the King is involved in ordinary activity and social responsibility, while the Fool has the inner spiritual freedom that allows him to enjoy these things. As we're talking about the first and the last card, they stand at opposite ends of the tarot when we see it in a straight line. But she makes the point that if we look at the tarot as a circle, then the Fool and the King are right next to each other.
Does that mean I'm like the King of Pentacles?
In a sense. Let's see what CROWLEY has got to say about the equivalent Thoth card. He says those whom he symbolises tend to be dull, heavy and preoccupied with material things. They are laborious and patient, but would have little intellectual grasp, even of matters which concern them most closely.
Is that good?
I think it's fairly accurate.
This is a warning that you will experience on a small trip an unimportant accident.
Thank goodness he let us know. We always need to be prepared for those unimportant accidents. When the King of Pentacles appears upside down, we get a very different image. Waite says reversed, vice, weakness, ugliness, perversity, corruption, peril. So when he talks about vice and perversity, I think Waite's referring to the reversed king becoming too involved in earthly pleasures. A little bit like the way the Golden Dawn viewed the reverse pentagram and its emphasis on matter over spirit. We also always get that idea of power being corrupted when the kings and queens are reversed, and weakness can suggest an inability to control their more negative urges. A lack of self-belief is another aspect. Rachel Pollack says the king is meant for success. Reversing him suggests failure or simply mediocrity. The lack of fulfillment brings dissatisfaction, feelings of weakness and doubt. CROWLEY had no good words to say about the negative aspect of the Knight of Discs, which is probably about right, really. He said if ill-dignified, these people are hopelessly stupid, slavish, quite incapable of foresight, even in their own affairs, or of taking an intelligent interest in anything outside themselves.
In the reverse, this card is a bad omen.
Great. Looks like we're finishing on a high, everybody. The big takeaway from the King of Pentacles is success in material matters, generosity and a deep love of nature. Ironically, our own King Charles of England has been a supporter of organic farming and a campaigner for the environment since the 1970s. You couldn't make it up, could you? He once said, "The future of mankind can be assured only if we rediscover ways to live as a part of nature, not apart from her."
It's the final card of the tarot. May I take this opportunity to thank you for braving your way through the crazed ramblings of the insane. I leave you with the hope that you may have picked up one or two pearls of wisdom from all this stupidity. May the coming days bring you success and wisdom. We shall return.